Hello, hello, hello. Toss, toss. Hmm. Second. Hmm. Welcome to my stream. I'm gonna start in 4 minutes. It was not working. What? What? Okay, there it goes. That's why I have to do this. How does that reset? Yeah. What am I doing here? Week. I'm taking a course on Coursera. Week 4. Let's go. But to create these pages, exercise and sleep. What? No, exercise. Video sleep. Video. One. Rethink. Rethink. Awesome stuff. Video. Part 2. Thort. Hedonic adaptation. Video 3. Reset your reference points. Video. Overcome bias. Please. Summary, okay. Video. Question and answer. References and notes. Quiz group 4. What? Reading. All right.
Let's get physical. Research suggests that till the 30 minutes a day of exercise can boost your mood in addition to making your body healthier. For the next week, you will spend each day getting your body moving with at least 30 minutes of exercise. Set aside a location and time, write it in your calendar. Then hit the treadmill at the gym, do an online yoga class, or throw on some headphones and dance around your room to cheesy pop songs. This isn't supposed to be a marathon level of activity. It's just
Hey, Kassups
more
06.
than usual. Note, if you have physical limitations that prevent you from doing this week's activity, do plan to skip it for obvious reasons. At the end of the day, make sure to log your activity. Be sure to take a moment to notice how much better you feel after getting some exercise in. Revirement handout. PDF file. 04_exercise. PDF file. Want to skip ahead in the course to learn more about how exercise can boost your mood? Watch lecture from week 5 titled Healthy Practices. Discussion of the research on exercise appears within the first 4 minutes of the video. Sleep. One of the reasons we are so unhappy in our modern lives is that we're consistently sleep deprived. Research shows that sleep can improve your mood more than we often expect. For the next week, you must get at least 7 hours of sleep for at least 4 nights of the next week. I know. You're super busy this week. There are deadlines to meet, friends to see, errands to run, etc. But sleep is going to make you feel better, both physically and mentally.
Soda scuff.
4 nights this week. Note them in your calendar. And get ready to get some much needed sleep. Also be sure to practice good sleep hygiene too. No devices before bed and try to avoid caffeine and alcohol on the days you're getting your sleep on. Each morning,
What?
be sure to log your amount of sleep in the tracking method you have been using for the revirements. Make sure you get 4 nights of 7+ hours over the course of the week. Revirement handout. PDF file.
So what's the takeaway from this? What is the takeaway? Slap.
In this activity, we're going to focus on exercise. Why exercise? Well, it turns out that moving a little bit more can have a host of positive benefits. Getting some exercise in can increase your mood. It can even decrease depression symptoms as much as an antidepressant medication like Zoloft.
Nani?
In a lecture that exercise can increase your academic performance, it's a totally free and super easy way to make your life happier and healthier. So how do we make the most of this activity? You don't need to get out there and run a marathon. You just need to move a little bit more. Maybe hit the gym for a half hour or take a walk with a friend at lunch. You can even just dance around your living room. The goal is to move a bit more and then to track what you do in this exercise activity. Again, tracking the habits that we do can help turn the healthy practices we do one day into a long-term habit. So get out there and move a little bit more. You'll end up becoming happier and healthier. In this activity, we're going to focus on sleep and getting enough sleep. Why are we spending time focusing on sleep? Well, as you saw in the lectures, the act of getting enough sleep every night can have a host of positive benefits. We know that making sure you get enough sleep can increase your mood over time. It can also increase your cognitive performance, like doing well on tests and so on. Getting enough sleep also has a host of other health benefits. It can decrease your risk of heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. It's a totally free and super easy way to boost your mood and your health. And so how do you make the most of this activity? It's pretty simple. You just got to get some sleep. Try to shoot for around 7 to 8 hours a night. And when you do, track your sleep in the Rewind app. As we saw in lecture, tracking your sleep over time can help turn getting a healthy amount of sleep into a habit. And so go out there and get some Z's on. You'll be happier and even healthier.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody, to our third lecture on the psychology of well-being. I hope you've all been thinking about the insights that you've learned throughout the past week and all your biases, and you're going to be able to use them. This week, we're going to have some actual concrete intentional strategies that you guys can use, and so you're going to have lots of homework this week, so be prepared. But just to kind of go through, again, just a reminder of where we were. First lecture, we went through all these misconceptions about happiness, these things that we think make us happy, but we don't. Last week, we talked about why our expectations are so bad. We did a little bit of a swap on the third one here, because today what I realize is that part of the stuff that's going to make us happy is actually finding ways to overcome our biases. And so this is going to be the first week we are getting concrete strategies of like actually making yourself happy. But the real shocking stuff that makes you happy is going to come next week. And I keep switching around, but we'll keep you on your toes. Back to our review. We started in the beginning with all this stuff that we think of as our goals that make us happy, and we said most of these don't make us as happy as we think. And we inserted this new term of miswanting, this idea that we don't want we're wanting the wrong stuff, and we are sort of miswanting stuff that we don't necessarily think is going to make us happy or that doesn't make us as happy as we think, and we're not wanting all the good stuff. And so we asked last time, why does this miswanting occur? Why are our minds so messed up? And we said, indeed, our minds are messed up. There are all these annoying features that seem to be leading us astray. And we went through a couple of these different ones. We said our minds have these intuitions that are often really, really wrong. We have to fight against that. We saw that our minds are not thinking in terms of absolutes. They're judging relative to these reference points, and that messes us up a lot because we're often comparing against reference points that aren't good. We also learned that our mind has this really terrible tendency to get used to stuff. And in fact, there's this corollary that we don't even realize that our minds do this, but it does this all the time. That means that the stuff that starts out as being good stops being good really soon because we kind of get used to it. And so we ended last time with this question of like, how can we overcome these annoying features? What strategies can we use to do this? And that is what we're going to reveal and talk about today, how we can overcome these annoying features or these cognitive biases. And we're going to do that in a particular way, which is we're going to use a set of strategies that we can intentionally use to overcome our biases. And I'm putting that word intentionally kind of in bold and in color, in part because this is the part that really matters. Our minds are naturally not going to want to use any of these strategies. These are the things that we need to do effortfully and intentionally to make things better. And we're kind of hearkening back to the quote that we started with in our first lecture, in this How of Happiness lecture by Sonia Lyubomirsky, who sort of talked about how we have this pie chart of the things we can intentionally control. And she notes that we have this, with these intentional, effortful activities, we can have a powerful effect of how happy we are, even much more so than our genetics or much more so than our circumstances. But it's these things, intentional, effortful, they're not going to be habits immediately. We're going to have to work to get them to be that, right? And so with that, we sort of jump into these strategies that you're going to intentionally use. And as I said at the beginning, this is going to be your homework. You're to be thinking about these things really in terms of habits that you can implement this week and which ones will actually work for you. But we're going to kind of go backwards through strategies that help the biases from the reverse direction. And if you recall, the main thing we were focused on at the end last time was this idea that we get used to stuff and that sucks because we get used to the stuff that's really good in our lives and we want to kind of feel it being new and so on. And so how can we, in some sense, get over getting used to stuff, overcome this horrible thing of hedonic adaptation, this idea that like we are happy at first when we get something, but that happiness goes away. Just as a reminder for folks who missed last time, we saw lots of graphs that look like this. We have this awesome thing that makes us happy, something like marriage, and it makes us happy for a little bit, and then over time that happiness goes down. And what we saw is that that basically happens in like all these awesome cases, from like having an awesome job to having tons of money, getting into Yale, as you guys all laughed about. Did you wake up this morning and say, holy cow, oh my God, I'm at Yale? I bet very few of you did that because hedonic adaptation. And all this hedonic adaptation, we have to awesome stuff. But how can we use strategies to overcome this stuff, right? We'll start at the bottom on strategies we can use to stop hedonic adaptation for awesome stuff, because the awesome stuff that we talk about is a particularly insidious thing. Stuff is usually like a thing that we buy, a nice car, a new house, and it has this terrible feature where it's not really dynamic at all. It doesn't change at all, and it sticks around. And that means stuff that we buy is sort of the worst culprit of our hedonic adaptation. And so when we think about the strategy we're going to use, it's going to be that we're going to stop investing in stuff in the first place. From now on, as you think about the kinds of things you can do to make yourselves happy, think about not investing in awesome stuff as much. Why? Well, as we were saying, first of all, it doesn't make us as happy as we think. We think the new house is going to make us super, super happy, but in practice it doesn't. And it doesn't in part because it sticks around. It's the same house day in and day out, and we kind of just get used to it. Same thing with all the other awesome stuff we have, awesome cars and so on. They end up sticking around, and that means we get bored with them. And there's a wonderful quip by the psychologist Dan Gilbert, who you heard about last time. It's part of us believe that the new car is better because it lasts longer. But in fact, that's the worst thing about the new car. It will stay around to disappoint you. This is the problem with stuff that sticks around. We get used to it. And so the new car, it hangs out, we stop paying attention to it. Like the longer it lasts, in some sense, the more time we have to get used to it, which is sort of boring. And so the first strategy we're going to think of, and this is for thinking about new things in your life, is don't invest in stuff. Invest instead in things that are not going to stick around, namely experiences. What do I mean about experiences? But just like anything you could pay money to that gives you happiness, that's not a thing, that's like something you experience. So going on vacation, or spending some time at an awesome art gallery, or going to Europe to check out the wonderful paintings there, or going to a concert, even something short like going out to eat or enjoying sort of a delicious dessert. Those are the kinds of things that are experiences, and they're not going to stick around. You're not going to have time to adapt to them. And Dan Gilbert also quips about this. He notes, a new car sticks around to disappoint you, but a trip to Europe is over. It evaporates. It has the good sense to go away and leave you with nothing but your wonderful memory. And it seems like our intuition is like, well, why would we want to invest in an awesome vacation? We could get a car. That car is going to stick around and be useful to us in the future. But again, this is a spot where our minds are kind of giving us the wrong feedback. We actually get more happiness than we expect out of experiences. Like the fact that the vacation is only a week long is a good thing. Like the fact that you can't be in this room looking at this art for very long means you don't have time to get used to it. Same thing with a concert. I think the longest concert I went to was 3 hours, and that was good. If it lasted any longer, it'd be terrible. Same thing with a delicious glass of wine. Some of you want it to keep going, but if it kept going, that would be bad. You actually want stuff that goes away. And so that's the intuition, that experiences should make us happier because they go away. But is this really true? Are people who invest in experiences actually happier? Like, is it the case that people who buy more of these are happier than people who buy more of that? Right? And for individual people, if you were to invest in experiences over stuff, would you feel happier? Well, this is what Leif Van Boven and Tom Gilovich studied. They actually had people come in and say, think about an experiential or a material purchase you made that's over $100. So you can think about this, and specifically something you bought to make you happy, not something like, not some textbook that you had to buy because you had to. Like, think of something that you've ever spent that actually you got to be happy, right? It says, when you think about this, how happy does it make you? Just very simply, does it make you not at all happy or very much? And they asked other things like, how good of an investment was it, and so on. And so here's what they find, is that when you think about how happy it makes you, how happy does it make you? Well, you get higher ratings for just thinking about the experiential purchase. Does it contribute to your happiness now? Even still, when you think back to it, does it contribute? Yes, these numbers are bigger for experiences. And also, was it money well spent in retrospect? Did you actually think it was a better use of your money? And what you find is that yes, it was. So all these measures of happiness, both at the time and retrospectively, you think of experiences as better. What they worried about in this first paper, though, was well, maybe that's just for all of us very well-off people. We're all here at Yale. We have lots of awesome stuff. Maybe we have as much awesome stuff as we need, and therefore, getting new awesome stuff isn't going to help us. So we might as well invest in experiences. But the idea is maybe people from lower incomes or people who don't have as much stuff, maybe if they got stuff that would make them happier. So maybe it's really just a function of being a richer kind of folk that we get this. And so to test this, they looked across different financial incomes to say, does this pattern hold across everybody? And here was what they found. That hash marked bar is the different experiences that you purchase. And what they find is that every level of income, experiential purchases make us happier than material ones, but it does in fact get bigger as you get to higher and higher salaries. So again, thinking back to what we learned the first time, most of your median incomes is going to be around $76,000. You guys are definitely going to be way better off investing in experiences than in material stuff. And so it does seem like investing in experiences is good, but there's a couple other ways that investing in experiences allow us to get over our hedonic adaptation. And one of these is that when we're thinking about purchasing different experiences, so when you're like sitting at your computer doing your problem set and you're thinking about your spring break vacation, that can actually make you very happy, right? And so researchers hypothesize that maybe this is another way that experiences help us, is that even before we have the experience, the anticipation of it, thinking about it, actually gives us a little happiness boost. Is this really true? Well, this is what Kumar and colleagues tried to look at. They had people think about some experiential or material purchase you plan to make soon. So you could say, think about the next kind of big purchase you're going to make, either a thing or like some sort of experience that you plan to have. And you say, how does the anticipation of this purchase make you feel? And they said, are you feeling kind of happier, like you're feeling more excited? Or is the kind of feeling of anticipation bad? Is it more like impatience? And then they also very explicitly had people rate whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. And so what do you find? Well, what they found is that if you look at the excitement levels, they're higher for experience than material, so it's more like excitement and less like kind of impatience to get it. And if you look at the pleasantness, it's almost like 2.5 times as pleasant to think about the fact that you're going to go on this cool ski trip or the fact that you're going to go to this awesome concert than it is that you're going to buy a new pair of shoes or a nice Canada Goose jacket or something like that. Thinking about these experiential purchases makes us really happy. Finally, it seems like we really look forward to these experiential purchases in a way that we might not. And just the fact that you're a person that tends to do that tends to think about your future experiential purchases, that might make you happier than tending to be a materialistic person that tends to think about your next material purchases. And to test this, they use this cool technique that we'll see a few times in this course, which is called experience sampling. Basically what they do is they get people's cell phone number and they give them a little app, and every once in a while throughout the day, they'll like send them a little blip that says check in and answer these questions. And usually they'll just ask something simple like, how happy are you feeling right now on a scale of 1 to 100? And this lets them tag, okay, what are the kinds of things you're doing in your day? Just a random day that let you think in terms of what's making you happy. And so if you said, you give your happiness rating, and then they ask you this question, hey, what were you thinking about? And you can go through, I was thinking about lunch, I was thinking about this stuff. Some people, just by chance, will be thinking about a future purchase. And they say, oh, that's great, now you're in our sample. And they say, was it causing you to experience excitement or impatience? Was it causing you to be pleasant or unpleasant? And then they tag what the purchase was. Was it a material purchase or an experiential purchase? And so here's what we find sort of mapping across these mean happiness ratings. That bar at the top is how happy you are. And what you find is when I ping you and I say, how happy are you? If you happen to be thinking about an experiential purchase, if you're thinking about the ski trip that's coming up, you are just necessarily happier than if you happen to be thinking about a material purchase that you were thinking of. And this is sort of coded for how much that purchase cost. So already we're seeing this happiness effect, but we see that that's because of two different things. One is that experiential purchases are making us feel more excited and less impatient. It's kind of like if you just bought this new set of shoes, you kind of want it to come in, you like putting it on Amazon Prime, you're like, when is this going to get here? It feels really impatient. But in the context of experiential purchases, we're feeling excited. And then same thing about pleasantness. They just feel better to wait for these experiential things than not. The sad thing, though, is that this phenomena, which seems to be pretty robust across a couple studies, that we like waiting for experiential purchases and that we're going to like them better, is another thing that falls prey to this thing that our mind delivers to us intuitions that are just wrong, because we don't actually believe that this is the case. And this is what a set of other researchers looked at. They said, these findings feel wrong to me. Let's check and see if this is really the case. And they had people make predictions, like think about an experiential purchase or a material purchase that you're about to make, and do you think your money is going to be well spent? You have to forecast that, and then they come back and ask you later, how was it? And so if you're thinking about a forecast before you buy something, you have the intuition that probably some of you are having when I'm telling you these data, which is like, yeah, those studies are all well and good, but that's not what I feel about my purchases. In fact, people are forecasting they're going to be about half as happy with an experiential purchase as a material purchase. They forecast that they're going to think it was half as good money less spent. But when you actually look at people's real post-consumption ratings, they're higher 2 weeks after post-consumption for the experience, and even 4 weeks after post-consumption. Long after this thing has evaporated away, and you still have that stuff that you bought, you're still happier with that experience that you've had before. But again, we don't seem to realize it. And so with that, we can say one strategy already for post-consumption for the forecast, which is like make predictions, like think about an experiential purchase or a material purchase that you're about to make, and do you think your money is going to be well spent? You have to forecast that, and then they come back and ask you later, how was it? And so if you're thinking about a forecast before you buy something, you have the intuition that probably some of you are having when I'm telling you these data, which is like, yeah, those studies are all well and good, but that's not what I feel about my purchases. In fact, people are forecasting that they're going to be about half as happy with an experiential purchase as a material purchase. They forecast that they're going to think it was half as good money less spent. But when you actually look at people's real post-consumption ratings, they're higher 2 weeks after post-consumption for the experience, and even 4 weeks after post-consumption. Long after this thing has evaporated away, and you still have that stuff that you bought, you're still happier with that experience that you've had before. If you have other friends rate how psych, just like boring and about your experiences, and then you say, because you don't actually look at it evaporated away, and you still have that stuff that you bought, you're still happier with that experience that you've had before. But again, we don't seem to realize it. And so with that, we can say one strategy already that all of you should adopt moving forward for all your future purchases to make you happy, which is that because you don't adapt to experiences, they're going to make you happier than stuff will. Even if your intuition is telling you otherwise, that's just wrong. Really, you're going to be happier thinking about experiences. So as you think about how you're going to treat yourself by buying yourself stuff, switch it around. Think of a cool thing to do, ski trip and so on. Think of free things to do that are experiences, and then you save money on top of it. Anyway, great individual strategy to get you going. But that works for, and so it's actually worth noting that experiences are better than stuff, not just because you don't adapt to them. They're actually better for other reasons too, which makes this one of the most powerful techniques you're going to learn about in this course. One of the reasons they're better than stuff is that when you tell people about your experiences, it's just way more fun for everybody else than when you tell people about your stuff, right? So imagine like you hear about somebody's cool ski trip. That's actually fun. But when you hear about somebody's new Canada Goose jacket and how warm it's making them, that's just like boring and it kind of sucks. And it turns out that this is one of the reasons that experiential purchases are better, is that it helps other people resonate with you. To test this, Leif Van Voven and colleagues actually did this study where they had friends rate hearing about other people's experiential or material purchases. And if you had them rate your overall impression of that person, that is higher after talking about experiences than material stuff. If you have other friends rate how psychologically well adjusted are you, you get people to think you're much more psychologically well adjusted if you invest in experiences than material things. And here's one of my favorite slides you'll see today. This is a list of the adjectives that people spontaneously talk about after their friends told them about a material purchase or an experiential purchase. And you can see much more kind of negative ones on that side. You know, he's self-centered. 33% of people after hearing what this say, oh, he's self-centered, he's insecure, blah, blah, blah. But over here it's like, oh, he's humorous and friendly and open-mindedness. You actually make people think you're twice as humorous by investing in experiences. And so this is kind of additional reason, not even about hedonic adaptation, why experiences are better, is like people just dig you better if you're the kind of person that invests in experiences. But there's a final reason, which harkens back to something we talked to last time, that experiences are better than material stuff, and that experiences are less susceptible to social comparison. It's harder to compare your ski trip versus somebody else's ski trip. It's much easier to compare your car versus somebody else's car. And that means that if we're the type of people who invest in experiences, we're less susceptible to social comparison. And we know this from a cool study by Howell and Hill, who actually did the normal things, talk about an experience or a material purchase you just made, and do all these ratings for it about your happiness. And when they do that, when they ask about how happy it made you, how was this money well spent, and so on, they find the same kind of thing that everybody else finds. They kind of replicate these other findings where experiential purchases are also better. But they find two other things that have to do with your social relations after that. The first is, did that purchase make other people happier? Like, or was it just you? And here you're starting to see an even bigger effect, that experiential purchases does seem to make other people happy. Sometimes it's because they include other people in a way that stuff often doesn't. Sometimes it's just through telling people about your crazy experience and it makes other people happy. But even more important is the fact that when you take measures of social comparison, do you feel socially, you do kind of compare your experiences versus somebody else? Do you feel envious of somebody else? Now that's the only spot where these measures start to flip. And so you're just less likely to socially compare your experiences with others. And that means one of those annoying features of your mind that's constantly making you feel less good about what you have isn't in operation for experiences in the same way it is for stuff. And so all these things suggest that the first strategy you can do to kind of make yourself happier is to invest in experiences rather than stuff. If you move forward with all your purchases into the future doing that, you're going to be better off.
Yeah.
problem though is that if we go back to our list of things that we have hedonic adaptation for, like awesome stuff that we're going to buy, fair enough, I can use this strategy. But what about for everything else, right? You already may have, like eventually you're gonna have a marriage, or you're gonna have a great job, you're already here at Yale. You might have awesome stuff that you already have that you can't like sell now to buy experiences, you just have it. And so how do you thwart hedonic adaptation for these other kinds of things? Well, you are in luck because now we have even more strategies that we can use to sort of stop adaptation in its tracks. And we're gonna go through a couple of these phenomena of sort of savoring your experiences, what I'm gonna call negative visualization, a strategy that Lubomirsky and colleagues have called make this day your last, and we're gonna spend lots of time on the last one, which is experiencing gratitude, which some of you said was one of your signature strengths. That's good. We'll all be boosting this signature strength this week. But let's start with savoring. What do I mean by savoring? Well, in the psychological context, when I'm talking about savoring, I'm gonna be talking about this act of stepping outside your own experience to kind of review and appreciate it, right? So when we have a good experience, when we're eating ice cream, some of you might have had some of the goodies that are outside, one of the like delicious cookies and so on, you can just have that experience, like, or you could kind of be mindful as you're having it and sort of realize that it is that experience. You could have the moment where you realize like, this is actually a good, delicious experience. Like I am like eating some glucose that's tasting really good right now. And you could have this moment of realization where you're like, this is really awesome. This is the phenomena of savoring. And it turns out that savoring does a couple things. One is it forces you to actually notice and enjoy that experience and keep your attention on it. Our attention is this horrible beast that's gonna be moving around all the time. You can be eating your cookie thinking about like what your problem set is and so on, or you could be eating your cookie realizing that you're having this enjoyable experience. And the latter means you notice things much more. And that means you start higher on your hedonic adaptation curve and it takes you longer to go down. The second reason that savoring is really important is it kind of focuses you on that experience for even longer. And that can also help you prevent adaptation. But is it the case that savoring actually helps you? And what specific strategies can you employ when you're savoring to kind of help you? And so this is a paper by Jose and colleagues who's been looking at this, and they really talk to people who either savor or don't, talk to people who enjoy their experiences or don't, and have them write down the exact things they were doing during that experience that caused them to savor the experience or not. Like specifically, what are activities and things you can be thinking while you're having that experience that help you? And so these are, based on their paper, the full list of the best things you can be thinking that cause
Why did it cut to that student?
you're having that experience. So the first is that you talk to another person about how good it felt. Like you're having this wonderful experience and you tell somebody about it. The other is that you look for people to share it with. You amplify your experience by being with other people. You think about how lucky you are. You kind of experience this gratitude for the experience. You share it later with others. So you think about how you're gonna I'm enjoying it and by myself right now, but as soon as I get out of here, I'm gonna tell someone and it's gonna be super awesome. You show physical expressions of energy. They talk about jumping around or like yelling. You say this. You sort of laugh or giggle because you like it so much. You think about how proud you are specifically for experiences, positive experiences like winning some award or having some thing that you really like that you can be proud of. And finally, you really were just in the present. You were absorbed in that moment. So all the people who had these experiences of these things, when you do stuff, it's gonna make you savor those activities. Even in simple things, as I said, like we're joking about like the cookies we have here before you guys come in, but if you were thinking about this stuff during that, you would enjoy that experience more. They also look though at activities that kind of decrease or hurt savoring, like things you, they also look though at activities that kind of decrease or hurt savoring, like things you can be thinking that make the experience less good and that make you savor it less well, that can increase hedonic adaptation. What are those? Well, the main ones that you see are cases where you're not in the present moment, but you're thinking about the future. So I'm focusing on the future. I'm thinking about what's gonna happen when it's over. Like as soon as the cookie's over, then we're gonna have the lecture, like that's bad. Thinking about the future is bad. Reminding yourself it would be over soon. Thinking that it wasn't as good as you hoped. So finding some other reference point and being like, it wasn't as good as I thought. That can really mess you up. Remind yourself that nothing lasts forever. It's never gonna be this good again. I thought it always could be better. Or here's another thing, it's kind of the opposite of gratitude. Like I told myself I didn't deserve this good thing, like a sheer way to kind of make you feel bad. And so what are we seeing? Getting out of the present moment, thinking like finding other activities. Even in simple things, as I said, like we're joking about like the cookies we have here before you guys come in, but if you were thinking about this stuff during that, you would enjoy that experience more. They also look though at activities that kind of decrease or hurt savoring, like things you can be thinking that make the experience less good and that make you savor it less well, that can increase hedonic adaptation. What are those? Well, the main ones that you see are cases where you're not in the present moment, but you're thinking about the future. So I'm focusing on the future. I'm thinking about what's gonna happen when it's over. Like as soon as the cookie's over, then we're gonna have the lecture, like that's bad. Thinking about the future is bad. Reminding yourself it would be over soon. Thinking that it wasn't as good as you hoped. So finding some other reference point and being like, it wasn't as good as I thought. That can really mess you up. Remind yourself that nothing lasts forever. It's never going to be this good again. I thought it always could be better. Or here's another thing. It's kind of the opposite of gratitude. Like, I told myself I didn't deserve this good thing. Like a sheer way to kind of make you feel bad. And so what are we seeing? Getting out of the present moment, thinking, like, finding other social comparisons of why it's not as good, and in particular thinking you don't deserve these things. These are bad and they're going to reduce your savoring. So try to kind of get more of the former and sort of less of the latter, and that's going to promote you experiencing positive activities.
Ah. Huh? Huh? Oh, right.
Another kind of more controversial way to savor is one that folks like Kurtz and colleagues talk about.
Oh, BRB.
Which is kind of taking images or literally taking pictures of this experience to enjoy it later. This is kind of Instagram in your life. And so this is a mixed bag for two reasons. And the reasons are that you can take photos and enjoy them in two different ways. You can be not being mindful and thinking about all these other things and focusing on your photos, or you can be using your photos to see a different aspect of the thing that you're keeping, sort of learning about new and better properties within it. And so if you're out on your vacation and you're sort of worried about taking this awesome picture and you're kind of not noticing anything, that's really bad. But if you're using the camera as just another lens through which to see things, you're kind of doing the savoring, like, I'm so lucky to be here. Like, look at how it's even more beautiful than just in my eyes. I'm kind of seeing it in a savoring way. Then all of a sudden it can actually boost happiness. So if you're an Instagrammer, if you're the kind of the person who's using Snapchat, using all these things to kind of think about your experiences, think about the way you're doing that. Are you really doing those savoring things? Or is the act of taking the photos interfering with that? And those two give you very different ways of dealing with your own savoring. Finally, there's nice work on thinking about savoring not just in the moment where you're having this awesome positive experience, but savoring stuff that happened in the past, your memories, and bringing them back. Because it is the case that you can enjoy something in the here and now, but we have this wonderful technique as a human where we can kind of pull up memories from the past and think about them again. And the act of doing that and doing that as a habit seems to really increase happiness. And that's what Sonia Lyubomirsky and her colleagues did. They talked to students and they were asked, not but they were asked to replay their happy memories in their mind for 8 minutes a day for 3 days a week. So you set your timer on your phone. You say for the next 8 minutes, think about a really happy memory that you had. And their exact instructions are, think about the event as though you were rewinding a videotape and playing it back. So for the next 8 minutes, relive the moment when you found out that you got into Yale. Or for the next 8 minutes, pick something that was really fun, like the most fun activity you did in the last year at Yale, and replay what that felt like. And like literally sit there and think about it, right? You might think that this is just this kind of ephemeral thinking about this thing. 8 minutes for 3 days, what's that, 24 minutes total, shouldn't do anything. But it turned out it had really huge effects on subjective well-being. In fact, the people in this study actually increased their positive emotions 4 weeks later. So 4 weeks later, I survey you, and the idea is still then you're having more positive emotions than if you didn't do this intervention. So this is the idea of the power of savoring. Really experiencing our moment and thinking about it and being there and being present can help us. And even if you missed it then, kind of going back and replaying the good stuff can actually lead to happier moments. So that's one way to break your adaptation. Be there, be present, recall it back so it comes back, you haven't gotten used to it, and then that's a great way to kind of feel better. The next one is what researchers and folks refer to as sort of negative visualization. You're kind of thinking about the reverse that could have happened. And the best example of this is the movie It's a Wonderful Life. Some of you have seen It's a Wonderful Life, this holiday movie. But basically the plot is that Jimmy Stewart kind of imagines what his life would be like if he were never born, like if it had never happened, right? And he sees that like had he never been born, all these really wonderful things wouldn't have happened and he couldn't have affected people's lives in a positive way and so on. It sounds cheesy, but it turns out that these like cheesy Jimmy Stewart movies were kind of onto something, that actually doing the habit of negative visualization, thinking about what things would have been if they didn't go that way, can cause you to kind of break out of your hedonic adaptation because you realize like, wow, I really do enjoy these things, and you're kind of back at the top of the curve. And this is what Koo and colleagues did. They did this in the context of romantic relationships, another spot where we see lots of hedonic adaptation. And they brought couples in, and for 15 minutes, they had to write about how they might have never met their partner. And they have this prompt that's like, you know, the things in life are just kind of like ephemeral. Like, think of the ways, like all the things that could have gone wrong when you never met your partner. Like, it's such a surprise that you got together. It's so unlikely. Talk about all these other worlds you might not have met them. And then they ask all these measures of subjective happiness, how much you love your partner, and so on. In contrast, the controls just wrote about how they met. So tell me how you met, and think about that. But you're not thinking about the possibility that like, wow, there was like a huge, huge probability that I might not have met this person ever, right? And what do they find? Well, what they find is when you look at happiness ratings, both of marriage and subjective happiness in general, when you wrote about it, how it might not have been, you're getting much higher happiness ratings than in the control where you just write about how it happened. You've been boosting your happiness ratings by about a whole point on the scale, which is pretty huge. And so you guys can kind of do that too. You can think about, you can really like literally go home and write about how you might not have gotten into Yale. What are the subtle things that could have gone wrong that made you just not get in here and you'd be at a different place? And what would that mean for the friendships you made or the stuff that you learned or all the stuff that you got out of this place? You know, by just a small, quick luck of a draw, some of you might not have wound up in Silliman. And like what a tragedy that would be if you didn't like get to Boston Courtyard and so on. I might not have wound up in Silliman. You know, if a year later I might have been the head of like Franklin or Murray or something terrible like that, but you might not, sorry for the apologies to those in the room, but you might not have met your suite mates. What was the luck of your draw that let you just happen to meet these particular people and become friends with those particular people, right? All of these things sound a little cheesy, but the act of doing them does an important psychological thing, which is that it breaks you out of the here and now. You're at this point of adaptation with being here at Yale, knowing your friends, being in this college, whatever, and like having the moment where